I always had this weird habit, never calling ahead when I was coming home. Some folks said that, at my age, pulling surprises was a young man's game. But for me, seeing my wife's eyes light up when the door opened earlier than expected, that was real happiness. Through more than 40 years of marriage, I'd seen 1,000 seasons of sun and rain, but I never got tired of that moment. The instant she'd turn around, maybe her hands still full of soap suds, and smile like the girl she was on our wedding day. I didn't know that this time the surprise would be on me, and it would also be the deepest wound of my life. A wound with no blood, but one that oozed shame, silent and constant, more painful than any physical blow. That day was December 21st, right before Christmas. I work as a rideshare driver, at 62 years old. After so many years in construction, with my back bent and my hands hardened by calluses, this car was my way of keeping a living without destroying what was left of my body. That afternoon, there weren't many customers. The city of Clearwater was quiet. Only the salt air from the Gulf slipped through the windows. I finished my last ride earlier than usual and thought about buying some pastries and a bottle of the wine Lucy loves, so we could spend the holidays in peace. "Quitting early today, Walt?" joked Ricky, a young driver from the same waiting lot. "Want to surprise my wife? After 42 years, you still got to keep some romance alive, right?" The kid let out a laugh and clapped me on the shoulder. "If you can still do it, old man, you're a lucky one." I drove slowly through the small streets, my heart as light as the evening breeze. I imagined my wife hearing the door open, running to greet me with her hands covered in flour, the smell of coffee filling the kitchen. Our life was never luxurious, but there was enough love to call it happy. As I turned down our usual side street, I noticed something strange. In front of the house, there was a black Honda Civic with unfamiliar plates, and next to it, the truck of my only son, Nathan. He never came by without calling, much less with company. I parked half a block away and got out of the car. The wind carried laughter from inside, the clinking of glasses. I felt a dark premonition. As I got closer to the gate, my heart stopped for a second. On the stone bench on the porch was Lucy. Her head was bowed, her shoulders shaking. I had never seen her cry like that, not even when my mother died. I walked slowly over to her and put my hand on her shoulder. "Lucy, what's wrong?" I asked softly. She lifted her face, tears still shining in her eyes. "Why are you back so early?" she whispered. "I missed you," I answered. "And who's inside?" I heard laughter. She looked toward the door and her voice trembled. "Just Nathan, his wife, and her parents." Then from inside I heard my son's voice, a voice that chilled my blood. "Mom, just sign it. Don't make this harder. I told you, this is for the good of the family." I froze. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I didn't know that the Christmas gift I was bringing home would be the start of a nightmare, born from the son who had always been my greatest pride. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and let us know where you're listening from in the comments below. I didn't make it inside. I stood frozen on the porch, staring at my wife. All the color had drained from her face, her eyes swollen from crying, her hands trembling as she tried to wipe away the tears. I felt something twist inside me, a coldness spreading through every muscle. From inside, the laughter rang out again. Men's and women's voices, unfamiliar, clashing in my ears like knives. I couldn't understand it. This was the house that Lucy and I built with our own hands, brick by brick. How was it possible that others were now sitting in there, laughing as if they owned the place? I leaned toward her, my voice breaking. "Lucy, what are they doing in there?" She shook her head, avoiding my eyes. "Don't get upset, please. They just came to talk." "Talk about what? That has you crying like this?" Before she could answer, a man's voice echoed clearly from the living room. "Mrs. Ramirez, please, just sign here. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's for everyone's good." I was ice. Who the hell was giving orders to my wife? I couldn't hold back. I walked firmly to the door and looked through the crack. Inside, the dining room table had been turned into a makeshift desk. Several beer bottles, papers with red seals, and 4 people sat around it like they were closing a deal. My son Nathan, the same one I'd been so proud of, was standing with a pen in his hand, pointing to lines and speaking with authority. Beside him, Amber, his wife, dressed in a tight dress, her face as cold as steel. Across from them sat a burly man with slicked back hair and a gold pinky ring, his father-in-law, Howard. Next to him, a thin woman wearing too much makeup with her arms crossed and an expression of power. Brenda. I didn't have time to react before Howard let out a rough laugh. Come on, Lucy. Don't think so hard. The young folks need to take care of the big things. You two have worked enough. Amber's voice, sweet as poison, chimed in immediately. Yes, Mom. Your house will be much safer in our name. Nobody wants to take anything from you. Every word was a hammer blow. Safer in your name? I gritted my teeth, and holding back my rage, I walked in. The room went silent. Nathan's eyes went wide with surprise. Dad, I didn't know you were coming home so early. And I didn't know my house had been turned into a title office, I answered, my voice heavy. What the hell are you all doing here? Howard stood up, extending a hand with a forced smile. Walter, a pleasure to meet you. We're just helping your son secure the family's future. I didn't take his hand. I stared him straight in the eye. Help him how? By making my wife cry? No one answered. Nathan looked down. Amber pretended to look at something else. I saw Lucy standing by the kitchen, trembling, with a pleading look in her eyes, as if begging me not to make a scene. But how could I stay quiet? They were turning a lifetime of work into just another business deal. Leave those papers, I said slowly, emphasizing every word. Nobody is signing anything. Howard shrugged, pouring himself another beer. His tone was calm, like someone who knows what he's doing. If you don't trust us, we can come back another day. But think about it, Walter. Time moves on and hands get tired. That phrase, time moves on and hands get tired. It chilled me to the bone. It wasn't advice. It was a warning. And I understood immediately. This visit wasn't casual. It was the beginning. And what they were after wasn't the family's future. It was my house. The air inside the house turned so thick it was hard to breathe. I was standing in the middle of the room I had built with my own hands, and yet I felt like a stranger. The 4 of them were still there, motionless. Only their eyes moved, shifting between confusion and defiance. Lucy stayed by the kitchen, her hands trembling as she held a dishcloth, as if she wanted to wipe away the shame that was spreading through the room. Nathan was the first to speak, faking calmness. Dad, don't misunderstand. We were just helping Mom sign some papers for security. I looked at him, not recognizing his voice, so polite and cold. What kind of papers need outside witnesses? Howard chimed in with the smoothness of an expert salesman. They're just formalities, Walter. If anything were to happen to you two, the house would be protected in your son's name. It's the most prudent thing to do. Prudent, I almost laughed. All my life, I earned prudence with sweat, not with tricks. I turned to Lucy. Do you know what they're doing? She looked down. They say it's to avoid problems with property taxes. You're out all day and I'm afraid something will go wrong. Then I understood. They had chosen the perfect moment, when I was gone and my wife was vulnerable. Amber, in a syrupy voice, added fuel to the fire. Oh, Dad, don't be like that. It's just a signature. You'll both keep living here, just the same. And then my son, in a tone that pierced my chest, said the line I will never forget. Dad, I'm taking care of Mom. You can't handle this much anymore. You spend all day driving, tired. We, the younger ones, have to think about the future. This house, I'll know how to make better use of it. The silence fell like a heavy blow. Every word he spoke was a knife in what was left of my pride. I looked at the boy I once carried on my shoulders, the one I taught to swing a hammer, to understand the value of work. And now he was telling me, without shame, that I was no longer useful. Howard leaned back in his chair, took a swig of beer, and mumbled with a crooked smile, "Walter, youth waits for no one. If you don't adapt, the world leaves you behind." I felt the fire ignite in my chest, but I held back when I saw Lucy's pleading eyes. I took a deep breath and spoke slowly. "Howard, this isn't a business. It's my home, and no one has the right to force my wife to sign anything." Nathan tapped the pen on the table. "Dad, you always think everyone is out to get you. I'm just trying to help you, but you're so stubborn. I don't want to argue, but if you don't cooperate, don't say I didn't warn you. Don't say I didn't warn you." The instant he said those words, I knew the crack between father and son was already open. His cold gaze, without a gram of respect, went through me like a knife in the back. I stayed quiet for a few seconds before answering calmly, "You can wish for whatever you want, son, but don't forget who gave you those hands you dream of conquering the world with." No one replied. Howard stood up, gathering the papers. "We'll come back when tempers have cooled," he said with a cynical smile. When the door closed, all that was left was the evening wind sneaking onto the porch. I turned to Lucy. She didn't say a word. She just covered her face and broke down in tears. And I, for the first time in my life, felt truly old. Not because of the years, but because my own son had just turned me into an obstacle in his path. I sat there at the table, looking at my house, the same as always, but now filled with alien footprints. On the tablecloth were open beer cans, glasses with traces of wine, and a smudge of red lipstick that still shone in the evening light. Among the pastries and empty plates, the documents with red seals were spread out as if they were the main course of that meeting. The air was heavy with a mix of cheap perfume and cigarette smoke. The only familiar thing was the trembling breath of Lucy, sitting next to me. I looked at her calmly. "How long were they here?" "About 2 hours," she replied, not looking up. At first I thought they were just visiting for coffee. Then they started talking about the future, about investments, about how children should take care of their parents. I didn't realize, until they took out the papers. Howard said that if we left them the house, the government would lower our taxes and we could keep living here. They made it sound so good, Walter. I squeezed her hand. "So good it made you cry?" She shook her head, choked by tears. I got up. I started picking up the cans, one by one, the glasses, the papers. Every movement was an attempt to regain control of my own home. But with every step, the shame weighed heavier on me. They had used my table, eaten the pastries my wife baked with love, and pressured her to sign away the house with practiced smiles. A party of lies, served up on the very tiles I'd laid with my own hands. I picked up one of the documents. The header read, "Property Protection Agreement." But in the fine print I discovered the truth. A clause that permanently transferred the property title to Nathan and Amber. A chill ran down my spine. "Did you sign anything?" I asked. "No, you got here in time," she answered, breaking into sobs again. "I just wanted to avoid trouble. They said if we didn't sign, we could lose everything because of a mistake on the old papers." I sat down across from her and looked at her steadily. "Lucy, you know what hurts the most? Not that they want this house. It's that our own son, the one who swore to protect you, was the one who brought them here." She covered her face, sobbing without consolation. I put my hand on her shoulder and spoke slowly, containing my rage. "Enough tears. They want to pass me off as a foolish old man. No, my love. They're wrong. They forget that the one who raised these walls doesn't just know how to use a hammer." Outside, the sunset was fading. The light crept across the tile floor, turning red like dried blood. I went out to the porch and looked down the street where my son had driven off. My chest felt like wet concrete. I remembered when he was a boy, waiting for me at the end of the day at the construction site, his eyes shining when I handed him a yellow hard hat. "When I grow up, Dad, I'm going to build you a house," he used to say. And now he wanted to take the very house he promised to give me. From the kitchen, Lucy's broken voice reached me like a whisper. "Walter, do you think they'll be back?" I looked toward the gate where the sun was dying in the shadows and answered in a cold voice, "They'll be back. But next time, I won't let them serve themselves beer or talk to me about the future." I went back inside, gathered all the documents and wrapped them up carefully. In my mind, the sound was clear. The metallic scraping of something being slowly sharpened. It wasn't a steel weapon. It was the will of a humiliated father who was ready to fight back. I thought they were gone, but not 5 minutes had passed when there was a loud banging on the door. Lucy jumped. I went to open it, and there was Nathan, his face red, his breath a mix of alcohol and rage. Behind him, Amber and Howard. None of them bothered to hide their anger. "Dad," Nathan said, his voice trembling with fury, "you made me look ridiculous in front of my wife and her parents. You always think the worst of everyone, as if the whole world is out to cheat you. But you're old, Dad. You don't know how to handle things anymore." I stood still. That phrase was a second blow, deeper than the first. It wasn't just disrespect. It was a denial. He was denying my value, my history, everything I had been. Howard stepped forward, his voice oily, cold as a razor. "Walter, don't take it personally. We all reach an age where we have to let the young folks manage our assets. That's just life." "What life?" I answered, not looking away. "The life where stealing someone else's hard work is called helping," Amber intervened, trying to sound kind, though her eyes shone with contempt. "Dad, don't exaggerate. Nobody wants to take anything from you. We just want to secure the house. If something happens to you, we'll take care of it." I couldn't hold back any longer. "This house," I said, marking every word, "every brick was laid by my hands. And you came in here, serving yourselves beer at my table, making my wife cry. And you call it concern. Get out of here." Nathan scowled. "Don't you see how stubborn you are? If the house were in my name, I could take out a loan against it. Open a business. Give everyone a future. You just have to rest." "So you need this house to go into debt?" I asked slowly. He faltered, avoiding my eyes. Howard let out a mocking laugh. "Everybody wins, Walter. Your son prospers, you rest. I don't see the problem." I looked around. The walls, the table, the kitchen, the cracks in the floor. Every corner was a piece of my life. No one had the right to turn it into a number on a contract. I took a step forward and spoke in a heavy voice. "At my age, I might forget a lot of things, but I haven't forgotten how to protect my wife. I already said it. Get out of my house." Howard's tone changed, his gaze darkening. "You're making a mistake, Walter. You don't know who you're dealing with." "I know perfectly well," I replied. "I'm dealing with people who think money can buy gratitude." Then Nathan stepped forward, his eyes blazing. "You're destroying my future." I looked at him. That son I once carried on my shoulders, whom I taught to keep his word, now saw me as an obstacle. I wanted to raise my hand, but it only trembled, and I lowered it silently. I opened the door and said in a low but firm voice, "If you have any respect left, go before I lose my patience." Howard threw one last line before leaving. "When you realize what you've lost, it'll be too late." The door closed with a dull thud, leaving the smell of beer and tobacco hanging in the air, like an insult still burning. Lucy came over and put a hand on my shoulder. "Don't be angry, Walter. He's our son." I shook my head slowly. "No, Lucy. That's not our son anymore. They taught him to speak with money, not with his heart." Outside, the streetlights had just come on. The yellow light reflected on my wife's tired face. "We are going to keep this house, Lucy," I said firmly. not just because it's ours, but because it's the only thing we have left of our dignity. The house was sunk in a heavy silence. Only the ticking of the clock on the wall marked the time, accentuating the void that had opened between my son and me. Lucy was sitting on the edge of the sofa, her hands wringing a damp cloth, her eyes red from crying. I looked around. The messy table, the smell of beer, the cigarette smoke, the lipstick mark on the glasses, the ink-stained documents. Every detail reminded me that someone close can become a stranger in a single afternoon. I gathered the papers and spread them on the table. They all bore the seals of a real notary. This wasn't a joke. The first line read, "Deed of transfer." Below, blank spaces for Lucy's signature and mine. My throat tightened. "Did you read them, honey?" I asked in a low voice. "No. They said it was property insurance," she replied between sobs. I didn't know what the fine print said. When you came in, they were insisting I sign. Tears streamed down her cheeks again. I sat beside her and took her hand. "Lucy, I don't blame you. They know you have a soft heart. They waited for the right moment when I wasn't here. But from now on, no one will touch what we built." "I'm scared, Walter," she whispered, her voice broken. "Howard said if we don't sign, they could sue us. That the deed to the house is old. That we could lose everything. They have money, lawyers, connections. And us, what do we have?" I was silent for a long time. Her question hurt because it was true. We had nothing but this house in our worn-out hands. But I finally answered. "We have something. We have the truth, Lucy. And we have each other." I stood up and looked at the room. What had been a home now looked like a battlefield. The remains of a betrayal scattered on the tiles. A spark began to light inside me. Not a fire to warm, but one to illuminate the faces of those who had trampled our trust. "What are you going to do?" she asked, somewhere between fear and hope. "For now, be quiet," I said. "I need to think, but they will be back." "I know," I replied, looking her in the eyes, "and when they do, they won't find a meek old man." I opened the wooden cabinet and took out a thick envelope full of invoices, blueprints, and the original documents for the house, signed in the years when I was still a bricklayer. Every sheet was proof that this roof was the fruit of my sweat, not their greed. I arranged them on the table and covered them with a tablecloth, like a soldier cleaning his weapon before battle. It was already dark outside. The distant sound of the Gulf waves in Clearwater mixed with the isolated barks of a dog. I felt my soul was like that sea, pounding the rocks again and again, retreating only to gather strength and return with more force. "Rest, Lucy," I told her quietly. "We'll see what to do tomorrow. Tonight I need silence." "Walter, are you angry with our son?" she asked in a thin voice. I pressed my lips together. It hurt so much I could barely breathe, but I answered calmly. "I'm not angry, just regretful. There are wounds that don't bleed, but they burn forever in a father's heart." Lucy came over, put her hand on my shoulder. I held it in my fingers, that same hand that had been with me through a lifetime of struggle, and I swore in silence. No one will ever make this hand tremble with fear again. That night I sat at the table, while the yellow lamplight illuminated my wife's sleeping face. In my chest the fire had turned to ash, but beneath that ash, the embers still glowed, ready to ignite when the dawn came. I couldn't sleep that night. The living room lamp cast a yellowish light on the peeling walls, illuminating the shadows of two old people, as still as statues. Lucy had fallen asleep on the sofa, her face still damp with tears. I looked at her, and my heart clenched. She had been the most cheerful woman in the neighborhood, the one who laughed when she heard me whistle on my way to work, the one who waited for me with a cup of coffee and her usual phrase, "You're home, Walt." Now all that was left were her sunken eyes and the fear reflected in them. I went out to the porch. The night wind from Clearwater blew in from the Gulf, bringing a salty taste and a cold breeze. In the distance, the lights of fishing boats flickered like fireflies lost in the dark ocean. I sat in the old wooden chair, holding the transfer document I had saved as evidence. The slanted letters and blue ink signatures seemed to mock me. The law, I thought, could also be bought with a smile and a few beers. "How could you change so much, my son?" I murmured, even though Lucy was asleep. "You swore one day you'd build another floor so your mother could plant flowers. And now you just want to tear down the roof to nail up a for sale sign." The pain rose up inside me, but this time it wasn't in the form of tears, but of fire. A silent, persistent fire, the kind that only those who have been humiliated understand. I lit a cigarette, something I rarely did. The smoke curled around me like an oath. I opened the cabinet drawer and pulled out an old phone book. Among the yellowed pages, I found a name that made me pause. Martin Riley, my friend from our youth, and now a captain on the local police force. I remembered the last time I saw him, at Nathan's wedding, 4 years ago. He had shaken my hand, joking, "If he ever gets in trouble, call me, Walt, but I hope you won't need to." I smiled bitterly. "Looks like that day has come, old buddy." I covered Lucy with a blanket. She barely opened her eyes, half asleep. "Still awake?" she murmured. "Yeah, just thinking about some things." "Don't do anything crazy, Walter. They have money, connections. We're just two old folks." I took her hand firmly. "No, Lucy. We're two old folks with a memory, and when memory is used well, it's worth more than any fortune." She managed a weak smile, and another tear rolled down. I wiped her face and whispered, "Sleep. Tomorrow is another day." When she was asleep, I stood by the window. The moonlight fell on the wooden table. I remembered every brick, every day mixing cement. The smell of dried sweat embedded in the walls. No one had the right to tear that away from me. I poured a strong cup of coffee and, with a clear mind, wrote a short list. 1. Talk to Captain Riley. 2. Get a good lawyer. 3. Review all the house documents. 4. Don't leave Lucy alone. When I finished, the clock read 2 in the morning. I folded the list and put it in my shirt pocket. Then I looked out into the darkness beyond the gate. I knew exactly what I had to do. I was going to fight, not with my fists, but with my head and with the truth. At dawn, the sound of the Gulf seemed to grow louder, as if it were encouraging me. I leaned into the wind and said in a low voice, just for myself, "They think I'm just a weak old man. Fine. We'll see who's weak when the game starts." The sunrise painted the roofs of Clearwater gold. I left the house before Lucy woke up and left a note on the table. Going to sort some things out. Don't worry. I knew she would worry. But if I didn't do something, we would live with this fear forever. The street was still damp with dew. I drove the old car toward the center of town, where the police station was, next to the market. The morning vendors greeted me. "Morning, Walt." I nodded with a forced smile. My heart felt like a stone. The building was just 2 stories, the green paint already faded. I went in, and the smell of coffee mixed with old paper. A young officer looked up. "Morning, sir. Can I help you?" "I'd like to see Captain Riley. Tell him it's Walter Ramirez, an old friend." The kid looked me up and down, surprised, and went inside to let him know. Minutes later, a familiar voice echoed down the hall. "Hell, Walt, haven't seen you in years." I turned, and there was Martin Riley, graying now, but still with the height and bearing of a veteran cop. He smiled and gave me a strong hug. "You still driving?" he joked. "Old guys like us are tough. If I don't work, I'll rot at home," I replied with a bitter laugh. "But I'm not here for jokes, Martin." He knew it instantly and led me to his office, where he poured us 2 black coffees. He closed the door, and the only sound was the whir of the ceiling fan. I told him everything. How I came home to Lucy, crying, Nathan's visit with his wife and her parents, The papers they tried to make her sign. Riley's face grew serious with every detail. When I finished, he put his hand on the table and sighed. Your own son, huh? Yeah, I replied. My blood. But he doesn't see me as a father anymore. He was quiet for a moment, then spoke slowly. I know Howard Ledesma. That guy has some shady business dealings. He takes advantage of seniors, buys their property cheap, and then flips it to tourists. They've probably got their eyes on your block. That whole area's value went up a while back. I clenched my fist. I'm not letting them take it. But tell me what I can do, Martin. I don't want to get into trouble. I just want to defend what's ours. Riley nodded. You're doing the right thing. Legally, if there's no clear fraud, it's hard for me to act officially. But I can do something practical. I'll send patrols by your street more often. If they come back, you call me, and we'll be there. And please, don't sign anything. Not a single page, even if it looks harmless. I will. He stood up and patted me on the shoulder. And about the papers, get yourself a good lawyer. I know a sharp young woman, Jenna Marshall. She's helped several elderly folks in similar cases. Her office is near the market. I wrote down the name like it was a light cutting through the fog that covered me. Thanks, old buddy. You don't know what this means to me. Riley smiled. I just do what I can. The important thing is not to let them see your fear. Bad guys smell fear, Walt. Stay firm. When I left the station, the sun was stronger and the street was shining. I stopped for a moment to look in the direction of my little house, waiting for me in silence. In my chest, the shame from the night before began to transform into something clear and decisive. If they want a fight, they'll get one. But I'll fight it with intelligence and with the law. After leaving the police station, I drove straight to the Central Market, where Riley had told me the lawyer Jenna Marshall's office was. The sun was high now, reflecting off the damp asphalt, forcing me to squint. The city seemed quiet as always, but a storm was raging inside me. I parked the car in front of a 2-story building painted cream. A small sign read, Jenna Marshall, Esq, Legal and Estate Services. I stood in front of the glass for a few seconds. I smoothed my shirt and took a deep breath before going in. A young receptionist greeted me with a kind smile. Good morning. Do you have an appointment? No, I don't, I replied. But Captain Riley told me to come see Ms. Marshall. Hearing Riley's name, she nodded and asked me to wait. A few minutes passed, and a feminine voice, firm but warm, called me from a doorway. Please, come in, sir. I'm Jenna Marshall. She had to be about 35. She was small in stature, but her gaze conveyed intelligence and calm. She wore a gray suit and her hair was tied back in a neat bun. I trusted her instantly. Captain Riley mentioned you needed help with a family property matter, she said professionally, without losing her kindness. That's right, I replied. My name is Walter Ramirez. I live in the Old Palm neighborhood, here in Clearwater. I think my son and his in-laws are trying to take the house where my wife and I live. I told her everything. From the afternoon I found Lucy crying to the confrontation that night. Jenna listened without interrupting, taking notes now and then, her brow furrowed in concentration. When I finished, her expression turned grave. Mr. Ramirez, she said, what you're describing is very serious, but unfortunately, it's not uncommon. We see many cases like this. Children or relatives pressuring seniors to sign over transfers. Sometimes they even forge signatures. I felt a lump in my throat. I'm afraid they might have already done that. I don't trust that there isn't some trickery involved. She nodded. The first thing we'll do is check the county recorder's office. I know several notaries who can confirm if there is any power of attorney or contract signed in your name or your wife's. I took the envelope with all my documents and placed it on the table. Here's everything. I saved every receipt, building permit, even invoices for materials from over 30 years ago. She smiled with approval. Excellent. Few people have your discipline. These papers are worth more than gold. We worked for almost 2 hours. Jenna reviewed every page, underlined phrases, and explained the legal terms to me with patience and without arrogance. She spoke clearly, without fancy words, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something I thought was lost. Respect. When she finished, she looked at me seriously. Your house is registered in both your names, all in order. But, she said, looking through another folder, if they got copies of your documents or a utility bill, they could have filed a fake power of attorney. We need to act immediately. What should we do first? I asked. Revoke any previous power of attorney, even if it's legitimate. Then we'll establish a trust, a legal fund that protects the property. That way, even if they pressure you to sign, the house cannot be transferred. I looked at her, speechless. While everyone else was telling me to resign myself, this woman was talking about defending, resisting, and getting justice. She stood up, offered me a fresh cup of coffee, and said in a firm voice, Mr. Ramirez, you are not alone. We are going to do this by the book, but with the courage you've already shown, they will not lay their hands on that house again. I took the hot cup. I looked toward the window where the midday light was streaming in, and for the first time in days, I felt hope. Confidence had returned, not in my son, but in the law. Jenna called me the next morning. I arrived before the scheduled time, hoping, however slimly, that it was all a misunderstanding, that no one had done anything behind my back. She was already there, on the phone. Her voice dropped a tone as soon as she saw me enter. Good morning, Mr. Ramirez, she said, motioning for me to sit. I was just talking to one of the notaries. They found something you need to see. I sat down. The palms of my hands were soaked with sweat. Jenna took a thin folder, pulled out a sheet with a red seal and a state stamp. In the center, the words hit me like a bucket of ice water. General power of attorney in favor of Nathan Ramirez and Amber Ledesma, granted by Lucy Ramirez. A general POA in my son's and his wife's name, signed by my own wife 6 months ago. I stared at the signature at the bottom of the document. It was Lucy's handwriting, unmistakable, shaky, slanted to the right. I remembered she had told me a while back that her hand got tired, that she sometimes asked me to sign the light or water bills for her. Now I held that paper as if it were a handful of ashes from the trust I thought was unbreakable. Are you sure? I asked, my voice rough. Yes. It has a legitimate notary's stamp, Jenna replied seriously. But I suspect fraud. It's possible they had her sign another document, or they forged something. They could have even imitated her signature. I dropped the paper on the table. In my mind, I saw Nathan laughing on his graduation day, hugging me at his wedding, and then that distant calculating look replacing the son I knew. I heard myself murmur, so he planned this 6 months ago. Jenna nodded. It seems so, but we're still on time. Today I will file a revocation of power, nullifying any previous authorization. I'll also send an alert to all the notaries in the region so they don't certify any document in your name or your wife's without both of you being present. Lucy doesn't know anything, I said in a thin voice. I'm sure they tricked her. Probably. I'll take care of investigating the notary where this was signed, she added. And Mr. Ramirez, listen to me carefully. From now on, you will be the sole legal representative for both of you. No papers, no procedures without your supervision. She started typing. The sound of the keys echoed like hammer blows in my chest. Every click was a nail sealing the innocence of a father who once believed his son could not betray him. When she finished, she handed me the document. This is the first step to regaining control, but I must warn you, this is going to make them furious. Be prepared. I signed. My hand was shaking, but the line of my signature was firm, without hesitation. Ma'am, I've lived long enough to know that silence is just as guilty when you let yourself be trampled. Her eyes lit up with a flash of respect. Exactly. From now on, we fight with the law and with the truth. I put the copy of the document in the inside pocket of my shirt. As I left, the sun was beating down on the street, and the murmur of the Gulf could be heard in the distance. I stopped for a moment, looking at the horizon. The pain was still there, but for the first time the fear was gone. Now I knew for sure. Their game was never just about money. It was about power, and I had just taken it back. I left Jenna's office around noon. The coastal sun beat down on the tin roofs like liquid fire, but inside me, there was a strange calm. Light. The first step was taken. The power of attorney had been revoked, and I finally had a real ally. However, I knew the real storm was still to come. On the way back, I stopped at a small diner by the highway. I chose a corner booth and ordered a strong black coffee. I took out the folder Jenna had given me and reviewed the documents again and again. Everything was in order. The revocation of the POA, the certified copy of the property deed, and the draft of the trust agreement we would sign the next day. At the end of the file, I found a handwritten note from her. Walter, if they come back, record everything. A silent recording is worth 1,000 shouts. I read that sentence several times. I felt those words fill me with strength. That young woman, a lawyer, understood better than anyone the pain of old folks when they're treated as if they're worthless. I thanked her in silence. I drove back home. When I opened the door, I saw Lucy watering the potted plants on the porch. Her expression was calm, but one look was enough to know she hadn't slept all night. "You're home," she said, putting down the watering can. "Where were you so early?" "Seeing someone who will help us keep the house," I replied. "Her name is Jenna Marshall. She's a lawyer." Lucy stood still for a few seconds. "Are you going to sue them?" "No, I just want us to have a defense if they come back." "But he's still our son, Walter," she whispered sadly. I sighed. "I know, but if parents don't protect themselves, children only learn to take, not to care." I told her everything. The fake power of attorney, the revocation Jenna had filed, the plan to create a trust to shield the house. With every word, her face crumbled more. When I finished, she could barely say, "My God, so this was all planned for a long time." I nodded. "Yes, but now we have a plan too." I took up my phone and followed the instructions Jenna had given me. I installed a voice recording app, setting it to activate with a single touch. I did a test. Test 1. "Recording," I said aloud. Lucy looked at me, half worried, half curious. "Are you going to record everything?" "From now on, any conversation with them," I replied. "Even if it lasts 5 minutes, it will be evidence." I showed her how to start and stop the recording and how to send the files via email. She learned slowly, but her eyes reflected a determination I had never seen in her. "I never thought I'd have to learn these things," she said with a sad smile, "but I guess it's about time." In the afternoon, I organized the desk. On the table, I left 3 things: Jenna's folder, my old phone book, and the cell phone with the recording app ready. I looked at them and murmured, 3 weapons for an old man: the law, memory, and evidence. As night fell, the sound of the Gulf returned in the distance. I sat by the window, watching the empty street, and I promised myself, if they come back, I won't shout, I won't fight. I'll just press a button and the truth will speak for me. Lucy came over, sat next to me, and took my hand. Her voice was shaky but firm. "I'm scared, but if you believe we can resist, I believe you." I smiled, squeezing her thin fingers. "It's not about winning, Lucy. It's about keeping our dignity. No one has the right to take that from us, not even our son." Outside, the wind began to blow harder. I knew the storm was approaching, but this time I wasn't unarmed. I had a light on in my hands, and a wife who, even with fear, was still by my side. The next morning, Clearwater dawned with a hot wind that stuck to the skin. I had barely closed the garage door when the phone rang. The name on the screen made my chest tighten. Nathan. I hesitated for a few seconds, then answered. Dad. His voice came, trying to sound natural. I'm stopping by today. I want to talk calmly. Howard and I just want to explain. No need, I replied curtly. We have nothing left to say. Dad, understand me. Just give me a chance. I was silent for a moment, then said cold, if you're going to talk, do it in front of your mother. But if you're planning on bringing papers, don't even bother. He hung up. I knew immediately he would come, and I was ready. I put the phone on the table. I activated the recording app and hid the microphone under the tablecloth, just as Jenna had taught me. Lucy looked at me, scared. Do you really think they'll come? She asked. Yes, I answered. They don't know how to give up. I'm scared. Please don't get angry with our son. I took her hand calmly. I won't shout. I'll let the truth speak. Less than an hour later, I heard engines in the street. I looked out the window. Nathan's truck and Howard's black sedan. My heart was pounding but under control. I pressed the record button. The door opened. Nathan walked in with a forced smile. Dad, I just want to clear things up. Yesterday was a misunderstanding. Behind him, Howard entered, with that slicked-back confidence he always carried. Walter, good to see you again. Yesterday was all a misunderstanding. We just want to help you. I planted myself between them and the table. Help? Help by making my wife cry? Help by forging signatures? I asked. They were silent for an instant. Howard let out a dry laugh. Don't exaggerate, Walter. What your son did was out of love. Nathan intervened, pleading. Dad, I just want the house to be safe. I've told you. If it's in my name, I can get a loan, fix it up, open a business. You don't understand. Times have changed. I looked him straight in the eye. Times change, but honesty doesn't. Are you going to turn your parents' house into collateral for your debts? Howard placed a thick file on the table. Look at this. It's a legal agreement, backed by my lawyer. I glanced at the title, Family Property Protection Agreement. But after reading just a few lines, I knew it was a disguise. A contract that transferred the title to Nathan and Amber, leaving his old man and his mother as temporary residents. I looked up and spoke, my voice icy but firm. Is that what you call protecting? I thought you knew better, Howard. He smirked. Maybe you should let the people who understand the law talk. I already did, I replied. I took another stack of papers from my briefcase. Howard's brow furrowed when I put them on the table. They were the documents Jenna had prepared. The revocation of power, the legal notice, and the certificate of the trust. I've consulted my lawyer. The house is now in an irrevocable trust. No one can touch it. The power of attorney you cooked up has been revoked, and we've already filed the paperwork with the authorities. Howard's face hardened. Nathan turned pale and stammered, Dad, how could you? I did what you should have done. Protect your mother. Howard, his voice harsh. You're fighting your own family, Walter. Reconsider. I smiled and pulled the phone from my pocket. I've already thought about it, and everything you say today is being recorded. Jenna recommended it. The atmosphere froze. Nathan was speechless. Howard angrily gathered his papers and muttered, This isn't over. No, I replied calmly. It's just beginning. When they left, I watched the door close. Lucy ran out, hugging me, trembling. Oh, what will they do now? She whispered. I stroked her hair. Let them do what they want. We did the right thing, and now we have proof. The sound of the engines faded down the street. For the first time since this all began, I didn't feel fear. I had touched the law with my own hand, and I knew this was no longer just an old man's battle. The night after the confrontation, the house felt lighter, though also emptier. Lucy and I barely spoke. We just focused on cleaning the living room. The smell of beer and Howard's tobacco still clung to the curtains, and that trace made my throat tighten. Every object, the chair, the tablecloth, the crooked wedding portrait on the wall, seemed to have been violated. As I was putting Jenna's document folder in the drawer, a whistle of wind came through the window. The hinges vibrated with a long creak. I looked out onto the porch. Darkness covered the empty street, and a restlessness settled in my chest. I knew it. They wouldn't stop. For people who live on money and tricks, failure isn't the end. It's an invitation to a new deception. "Walter," Lucy whispered, placing a cup of tea on the table. "I don't feel safe. What if they come back when you're not here?" "I've been thinking the same thing," I replied. I picked up the phone and dialed the number my memory held intact. Sal Petrocelli, my old buddy from the construction days, now the most skilled locksmith in the neighborhood. His voice, gruff but friendly, sounded on the other end. "Walt, been a long time. Is something wrong?" "Sal, I need you to change all the locks on my house as soon as possible. At this hour, I'll pay double. It's not because I'm scared. It's because I want to sleep soundly." A sigh on the other end. "Got it. I'm on my way." Half an hour later, Sal arrived on his beat-up motorcycle, his toolbox hanging from his shoulder. As soon as he crossed the threshold, he sensed the tension in the air. "Trouble with the kid?" he asked cautiously. I nodded. Never thought I'd have to change locks for fear of my own son. Sal looked down as he prepped his tools. "Sometimes folks lose gratitude before they lose their minds, Walt. But don't worry. I'll handle the metal. You take care of your spirits." While he worked, Lucy made coffee. The buzz of the drill, the metallic click of the locks, and the aroma of coffee filled the house with a strange sensation, as if those sounds were the echo of a new security. Sal replaced 3 locks and then pulled 2 small devices from his pocket. "These are miniature cameras," he explained. "They connect to your phone. If anyone crosses the threshold, you'll get an alert." I looked at him, surprised. "You do this too?" He smiled. "In these times, us old-timers have to learn tech too." When he finished, he handed me 3 sets of new keys. "Keep one, give one to Mrs. Lucy, and hide the third one well." I tried to pay him extra, but he refused. "No charge between friends. May God protect you, Walt." After he left, I locked the doors and stood looking at the house. It was still the same, old and modest. But now it had a different kind of armor. Not one of steel or cameras, but one made of recovered trust. Lucy came over and rested her head on my shoulder. "Now I feel a little bit of peace." I took her hand, looking toward the window where the night wind slipped through a sliver of light. "Peace, Lucy," I said with a faint smile. "It's only temporary, but at least, this time, we're ready for the storm." 3 days had passed since I changed the locks. Clearwater was still under a burning sun, but there was a different kind of chill in the air, the kind that comes before something inevitable. The silence from Nathan and the Ledesmas didn't calm me. On the contrary, it put me on high alert. People like that don't know how to give up. They just know how to wait for their moment. That morning I was cleaning the car when Lucy came out with the phone in her hand. "Walter, they called again," she said, her voice trembling. "Who?" "Amber. She says she wants to come apologize and that she's bringing people from the courthouse to clear up the misunderstanding." I looked at her in silence for a few seconds. "People from the courthouse, you said? That's what she said?" She nodded, her lips pressed tight. I sighed. I turned on the camera Sal had connected and checked the signal. Everything was working. I spoke to her slowly. "Listen, Lucy, if they come, do not open the door. No court works like that. If they try to pressure you, call Jenna and Captain Riley. Got it?" "Are you going out?" "I have a few rides scheduled, but I'll be back soon." I tried to sound calm, though I knew exactly what this meant. Their next move, having lost the legal power and been exposed, Howard would be looking for a new angle. And I guessed it right. They wanted to declare us incompetent. That afternoon, while waiting for a fare near the bus terminal, my phone vibrated non-stop. It was the camera notification. Motion detected. Front door. A chill ran through me. I opened the app. On the screen, I saw Amber, accompanied by a woman in a suit with a clipboard and a man in a white coat. I gripped the steering wheel. I immediately called Lucy. "Walter." Her voice was a thread. "They say they're from Adult Protective Services, that they're here to evaluate our health and capacity, that Nathan requested the visit because he's worried about us." "Don't open the door," I yelled. "Call Jenna and Riley right now. Now." I already called them. They're on their way. But they're filming from outside, saying I'm hiding. I floored it. 10 more minutes. Just 10. I repeated to myself as the engine roared. When I turned onto my street, the scene was burned into my memory. Amber banging on the door and shouting, "Mrs. Lucy, if you don't open, we'll call the authorities. We just want to help you. We don't want to hurt you." Next to her, the woman in the suit pretended to take notes, while the man in the white coat filmed with his phone. It was all a setup. I got out of the car and spoke in a firm voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, what are you doing on my property?" The three of them turned. Amber was startled, but she quickly faked politeness. "Oh, Mr. Ramirez. Good, you're here. We're just doing an evaluation." "Evaluation of what, ma'am?" I asked, walking closer. Neither my wife nor I requested anything. The man in the white coat stammered, "We're acting on a request from your son." "My son no longer has any authority here," I replied, cold. "And if you don't leave my property right now, I will have you arrested for trespassing and impersonating an official." At that exact moment, a patrol car pulled up to the gate. Captain Riley got out, followed by Jenna. Their faces were pure determination. Jenna held up her credentials. "Which one of you is actually a social services official?" The woman in the suit stammered, We are private consultants." "Then you can come with us," Riley ordered, pulling out his handcuffs. "This looks like harassment and fraud." Amber turned pale, trying to smile. It was all a misunderstanding. We just wanted to help. Jenna cut her off, her voice sharp as a razor. "No, you didn't want to help anyone. You mounted a farce to declare them incompetent. And the sad part for you is, it was all recorded. Thank you, Mr. Ramirez, for having the camera on." I stood frozen, watching them being put into the patrol car. Lucy ran out and hugged me, trembling. "I thought you wouldn't get here in time." I held her close. "I'm here now. And from now on, Lucy, we haven't just saved our house. We've gotten back our dignity." The wind from the Gulf blew hard, carrying away the echo of the siren as it faded down the street. I knew the war wasn't over yet, but that afternoon, for the first time, we had won the first battle. The next morning, the clear water lights slanted through the window, illuminating Lucy's tired face. She hadn't slept all night. I had barely closed my eyes for a few minutes. The echo of the police siren and the image of Amber being escorted away still resonated in my head. But between the exhaustion and the memory, I felt something new. A serene lightness, as if after years of humiliation, I could finally breathe in peace. Jenna arrived early, with 2 thick folders under her arm. She wore the same gray suit, but her face radiated energy. She greeted us with a firm smile. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Ramirez. I bring good news today." Lucy looked at me before hurrying to pour her coffee. "Thank you, Jenna. I haven't stopped thinking about all this. Can they bother us again?" "No," she replied confidently. "The people from yesterday, including Miss Ledesma, are being investigated for impersonation and forced entry. But there's something more important." She opened a folder and placed 2 documents with red seals on the table. "Here are the results of the judicial and medical evaluation. The court and the hospital certify that you are both of sound mind and legal capacity to manage your assets." Lucy broke down crying, clutching her chest. I took one of the sheets and read it carefully. The conclusion stated, "Mr. Walter Ramirez and Mrs. Lucy Ramirez present full mental and emotional capacity and do not require third-party guardianship." I put the document on the table and murmured, "Jenna, thank you. You didn't just help us keep our house. You gave us back our dignity." She smiled, a melancholy glint in her eyes. "Mr. Ramirez, many elderly people lose their voice because they stay silent. You two proved the opposite. I was just the hand that wrote down your justice." Lucy dried her tears and said with a sad sweetness, "Maybe for a long time, we let others speak for us." Jenna nodded. "But that's over. These documents will be filed in the judicial record. If anyone tries to question your rights again, they'll only need to see this." I put the papers carefully in the drawer, like someone putting away a medal. I understood that some victories don't come with bullets or shouting, but with the signature of someone who refuses to bow their head. At noon, Jenna left to continue her work. Lucy and I sat on the porch, the sea breeze caressing the house. She looked at the street and smiled faintly. "Remember, Walter, when we were building this house, many people said, 'How dare two old folks go into debt to build?' They laughed at us. But we did it." I squeezed her hand. "Yes, because when two people believe in each other, there's no fear that can stop them." I looked up at the sky. The small lens of the camera Sal had installed was still blinking on the ceiling. I knew that everything that happened had been recorded, not just as proof, but as a testimony that we still have the mind, heart, and courage to defend ourselves. I looked at my wife and smiled. "You see, Lucy, this paper doesn't just prove we're still lucid. It proves that no matter how hard they try, they can never take away our dignity." The following days, everything returned to a suspicious calm. There were no calls, no strange cars, no banging on the door at noon, just the constant rumor of the sea and the wind moving the palm trees in front of the porch. Lucy said this was peace, but I didn't believe it. When the enemy goes silent, it's because they're planning their next move. On the third afternoon, I was at a coffee shop facing the beach, watching the horizon where my house stood. The coffee had gone cold, but my mind was still racing. Then the phone rang. It was Jenna, her voice tense. "Mr. Ramirez, I've just been informed that Howard has hired a new lawyer. He's gathering information to sue me and you, claiming you were manipulated by me." I smiled with irony. "Then he still doesn't understand that I'm not the same man I was before." "All the same, be careful," she insisted. "If they can't find a legal loophole, they'll look for another way to do damage. Stay in touch with me, and please, don't leave Mrs. Lucy alone." "I will. Thanks, Jenna." I hung up, paid for the coffee, and got in the car. In the rearview mirror, I noticed a silver sedan that had been following me for several blocks. I took a sharp turn into an alley, and the car followed. My heart hammered against my chest. I braked. I got out of the car and looked straight into the side mirror. The vehicle stopped a few yards away and then did a U-turn without a word. There was no doubt. I was being watched. When I got home, I checked the cameras. Twice that day, someone had stopped in front of the gate to film, and then left. Lucy was scared, but I put my hand on her shoulder. "It's nothing, Lucy. The more they try, the more they show they're afraid." That night I called Captain Riley. He answered immediately. "I know, Walt. Howard's people are testing the waters. Don't go out alone. I'll send a patrol to circle your street." I thanked him and hung up. I sat at the table and opened my old notebook. I wrote a few lines. "Silence is the coward's cloak, but it's also the moment when the brave man prepares his final strike." A strong wind was blowing outside, saturated with salt and cold. Lucy came over. She draped a shawl over me and whispered, "This storm scares me." I squeezed her hand. Storms pass, Lucy. The important thing is to stay standing while they last. That night from the window, I saw a car's headlights flash on and off at the end of the street. And I knew the battle wasn't over. It had just sunk into a tense silence before erupting again. That morning, the sky over Clearwater dawned strange, heavy. The Gulf wasn't blue but gray, and the wind hit the tin roofs, making the whole street vibrate. I made coffee early, trying to seem calm, even though I knew the storm wasn't just outside. Lucy was still weak. She hadn't slept. She spent the night repeating that she feared the return of Howard and Amber. I calmed her, asked her to rest, and left for work. I took a few short fares trying to maintain a routine, but the restlessness grew like a wave that wouldn't stop rising. Around noon, while waiting for a fare by the pier, the phone began to vibrate non-stop. A camera alert. Motion detected. Front door. My heart stopped. I opened the app. On the screen were Nathan and Amber, at my front door. With them, a man in a white coat and a medical bag, and a young woman filming with her phone. Behind the curtains, I could see Lucy's silhouette. I dialed her number immediately. She answered instantly, her voice catching. "Walter, they said you had an accident, that they were coming to tell me and bring me medicine. When I opened the door, they came in. They gave me something to drink. I feel dizzy." I almost shouted, "Don't let them touch you, Lucy. I'm on my way." "I'm scared, Walter." Her voice broke. I slammed the accelerator, furious. On the way, I called Riley. "Riley! They're in my house. The fake doctor is there. And my son." "Calm down, Walt. I'm on my way. Don't confront them alone." But it was impossible to wait. When I turned onto my street, the scene broke my soul. The door wide open. Lucy in a chair, pale, her eyes half closed. The fake doctor was taking her blood pressure while Amber filmed, saying loudly, "As you can see, the woman is in no condition to decide anything." I walked in, my steps firm. My voice came out like thunder. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" The three of them turned. Nathan froze. Amber stepped back. "Dad, I warned you, Nathan. You just crossed the line. What did you give your mother?" The man in the white coat stammered, "Just a mild sedative." She was very agitated. I ripped the bottle from his hand. "No one gives my wife anything without my consent." At that moment, a patrol car siren sounded. Riley entered with Jenna, their faces tense. She knelt beside Lucy, took her pulse and murmured, "She's okay, just a little dazed. We got here in time." Riley turned to the fake doctor. "Doctor, is it? Where's your license?" The man was mute. Jenna intercepted Amber, who was trying to hide her phone. "That video, we'll be seeing it in court," she said, her voice sharp. The previously silent house filled with noise, the wind whistling through the windows, the footsteps of the police, Nathan's useless protests. "Dad, I didn't want to hurt her. I was just following Howard's orders." I looked straight at him, a mix of rage and sadness. "No, son, you weren't obeying anyone. You chose the easy path, doing wrong instead of doing right." Riley gave a signal and the officers put them in handcuffs. I knelt beside Lucy, taking her hand. She opened her eyes and whispered, "They wanted to take me. They said I was crazy." "No, my love," I answered, trembling. "They can't ever touch you again." Outside, the wind howled, and the salt smell of the Gulf blew in through the open door. But inside me, there was no more fear. All that was left was a living flame, that of a man who, pushed to the limit, had decided to fight to the end. That night, after the police took everyone into custody, Jenna and Riley drove us to the station to give a statement. Lucy was still dizzy, but conscious. I held her hand while the sound of the rain pounded furiously on the car roof. Outside, the wind whistled between the poles, and lightning split the sky. A real storm was hitting Clearwater, but a moral storm was also hitting our lives. At the station, the cold fluorescent lights gave an impersonal feel. Riley took us to a separate room while Jenna handled the paperwork. In the next room, we could hear the agitated voices of Amber and the fake doctor. Then Riley's heavy voice boomed. "That's enough. You tell the truth right here, or you go straight to jail." I turned to Lucy. "Feeling better?" I asked. She nodded weakly. I can still hear her voice. Amber was saying I was crazy, that I didn't even remember who you were. I squeezed her hand. "Don't let her words reach you. We're out of this." The door opened. Jenna came in with a stack of documents and exhaled. "They spilled everything," she said. "The doctor was a hired actor. They paid him $300 to fake the visit and record the video they would use to ask a judge to take away your legal guardianship." Lucy put her hands to her chest. "My God." "And it was Amber who planned it all," Jenna continued. "But the one pulling the strings was Howard." The silence hung heavy in the air. I felt fire and ice mix in my chest. At that moment, Riley came in, escorting Nathan, his hands cuffed, his gaze on the floor. There was nothing left of the arrogant son from before. His face was pale, his hair stuck to his head from the rain, his eyes red. "Dad," he murmured, "forgive me." I didn't answer. Riley gave a signal and they took off the cuffs. Then he left, leaving us face to face. Nathan hung his head. I didn't know it would go this far. Howard promised to pay off my debts if I helped him with the papers. I thought it was just a temporary transfer. When Amber said they were bringing a doctor, I wanted to back out. But he threatened to report me. I looked at him. I remembered the boy I carried on my shoulders, the kid I taught to use a hammer and to repeat the phrase I always told him. "A man's word is worth more than gold." Now in front of me, there was just a broken man, without honor. I asked quietly, "Did you think about your mother when you let them give her those pills? Did you think about me when you let them manipulate you?" He broke down crying, hiding his face. "I know, Dad. I was a fool, a coward. I just wanted to get out of debt. But when I saw her fading, I wanted to stop it. I haven't slept a full night since that day." I sighed. I felt pain and compassion mix like two opposing currents. My voice came out low and rough. "Debts are paid with money, son, but the debt of honor is paid differently." Just then Jenna returned with a document in her hand. "Howard is in custody," she reported, "and as for Nathan," she looked at him, "if you authorize it, he can be released on the condition that he testifies against Howard." I looked at her, then at my son. Nathan looked up, his eyes pleading. I nodded slowly. "Let him go. But from today on, he's not a child under my roof. He'll have to earn the right to call himself my son again." Nathan fell to his knees, crying, "I'll do it, Dad. I swear I'll do it. I'll tell the whole truth. I'm going to start over." I looked away so he wouldn't see my tears. Lucy put her hand on my shoulder and said softly, "Walter, forgive our son." I didn't answer right away. I just murmured, low enough for her to hear, "I don't know if I can forgive him yet. But I know that without compassion, we'd become just like the people who hurt us." Outside, the storm was starting to subside. The gray light of dawn filtered through the window and fell on the papers on the table. And I knew that the darkest night was ending, even if my heart hadn't yet learned how to be calm. The next morning, the sky was a clean, deep blue. The storm had passed, leaving the air so pure it seemed newly washed. Lucy and I were sitting on a bench in the station hallway, waiting for Jenna to finish the paperwork. The sunlight came through the window and reflected on her gray hair. She looked fragile, but in her eyes, I recognized the woman from before. Brave, calm, incapable of giving up. The door to the interrogation room opened. Nathan came out without handcuffs. When he saw us, he stopped, his hands trembling. Jenna was behind him and spoke to us in a low voice. "Howard and Brenda will be prosecuted for fraud and forgery. Nathan testified to everything. If you agree, he can be released on probation to cooperate with the police. He spoke. Mom, I don't deserve your forgiveness. But let me fix what I did. I swear I'll help capture Howard. Lucy squeezed my hand and whispered, Walter, let him do the right thing, even if it's just this once. I stood up and walked toward my son. He didn't dare look at me. I put my hand on his shoulder and spoke in a voice that was hoarse, but firm. I don't forgive you, not yet, but I'll give you a chance, on 3 conditions. First, you will help the police bring the Ledesmas to justice. Second, from now on, you will live on your own work without depending on anyone. Third, when you earn your first honest paycheck, you will come to this house. Not to pay a debt, but to prove you still know how to be a decent man. Nathan nodded through his sobs. He couldn't speak. I turned to Jenna. Do the paperwork, please. I don't want to see him in chains again. Jenna smiled faintly and led him away. Lucy hugged me and murmured, You did the right thing, Walter. It's easy to be angry with a child, forgiving him. That's the hard part. I haven't forgiven him, I replied softly. I just gave him a chance to keep what little humanity he has left. A soft breeze moved through the hallway. Outside, the palm trees swayed under the sun. In that instant, I understood that life isn't measured in victories or defeats. Some wounds never heal. But as long as you look toward the light, you can keep walking without lowering your head. And that is the only forgiveness a real father can offer. A year had passed since that day. Clearwater was still the same. The hot sun, the salt wind, and the waves hitting the shore with the constancy of a remembering heart. But for Lucy and me, everything had changed. Our house was no longer a refuge of fear, but a sanctuary for those who learned to stand tall. Nathan was living up in Atlanta now, working in a small carpentry shop. Every month he sent a postcard, and sometimes a little money. It wasn't much, but every dollar was clean, and every word written on those postcards was sincere. Dad, Mom, I'm still trying, he wrote. Every time they arrived, Lucy would get emotional. I just nodded, feeling that mix of pain and relief. Forgiveness doesn't erase the memory, but it lets you breathe without choking. Jenna came by from time to time, with the case file now closed. Howard was sentenced to 8 years in prison, she told us, and Brenda lost everything she had to debts. They can't hurt anyone else. I thanked her and asked, Why do you think there are people who can't stop taking what doesn't belong to them? She smiled sadly. Because they never knew the value of work, Mr. Ramirez. And you know that better than anyone. That afternoon, Lucy and I sat on the porch. The chrysanthemum pots she had planted were full of flowers. She looked at the sky and said, with a quiet smile, Walter, I think we won. I smiled. Won? No, Lucy. We just got back what was always ours. Love, the house, and our dignity. The sun descended slowly, painting the tiles I had laid with my own hands so many years ago with gold. I closed my eyes and listened to the sea, the wind, the echoes of humiliation, betrayal, and resistance. It all mixed together like a slow, deep, but proud symphony. I took her hand and murmured, You know, Lucy, you can lose money, a house, or even your children, but if you keep your dignity, you haven't really lost anything. She rested her head on my shoulder and replied softly, You're right. Dignity is the only thing no one can steal from us, unless we give it away. In the distance, the sun was rising over the horizon, bright, serene, true. A chapter was closing, leaving the story of 2 old folks who taught the world a simple, eternal truth. Justice isn't vengeance. Justice is holding on to your goodness, even in the ashes. If this story captivated you, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left of your screen. Thanks for watching.